All right, what's going on, people? I hope that you and yours are well. I put on a festive little shirt because, I am actually going to be talking to someone who is absolutely greater than you could ever imagine in all of her queendom. And I got my South Florida vibes on, so I figured I put on a little cabana shirt because that's what we do. We get ready for it. So I'm just saying, like, that's gonna be cool. I'm just curious for y'all, like, how are you actually taking care of yourself? Are you moving your body? Did you go to the Beyonce concert? Like, what are you excited about? Like, all of that energy is coming and flowing. So I'm gonna calm down. I hear my mama like, all right, baby, calm down. Just in case you have never heard of this voice before, I'm Craig Aaron Martin, educator, advocate, and curator of Courageous Conversations. This is a space for those who refuse to shrink and who lead with love and courage, y'all. I hope you're ready for this cup of courage, y'all. Let's brave it together. Today's guest, y'all, is a powerhouse who's redefining what justice and advocacy looks like for the next generation. Allison Matulli is a lawyer, educator, and fearless founder of the Little Lawyers. But they ain't little, y'all. A groundbreaking program that teaches young people about their rights, the law, and how to be their own advocates. Because justice belongs to everyone, no matter their age. With roots grounded in Haitian pride and a legal career that spans advocacy and education, Allison is passionate about giving kids, families, and communities the tools to speak truth to power. Her voice has been featured in the Miami Herald and across platforms that celebrate Black women in law and leadership. Allison, welcome to Brave Voices. How is your heart today?
It's over. Just hearing that introduction, your energy, my goodness, the vibrance. I'm feeding in.
That's New Orleans, that's that New Orleans in me. So I'm like, okay, it's like showing up. It's like, okay.
Been to New Orleans.
Oh, we have to change that in 2025. It's just a quick like hour and 15-minute flight from where you are.
Definitely on my list. It's high. It's high.
I mean, because, there are Haitian roots also in New Orleans. Beyond this demonstrative, like, oh, guys, voodoo. I'm like, if y'all don't go ahead and kick rocks, like, there is Haitian history in our food, in our language, in our music, as more. But I'm curious about your roots and just, your origin story for those who haven't had the opportunity. But I would love for you to take us back to little Allison, growing up with Haitian roots. What early lessons about justice or resilience did you see modeled in your family or community? And how does that surface today in you standing so tall in the work that you do?
So, one thing, Craig, and I want to just clarify I'm actually Trinidadian. Yes.
Hey, I'm firing my assistant. Good Lord.
I tell you what, I live in South Florida and I swim with my Haitian people. I mean, I'm a thread within the tapestry of our Caribbean culture. And we're interwoven, we're deeply rooted as one in many ways. So, little Allison,
For that. That was so much grace. I appreciate the grace. I'm like, but I'm gonna give my assistant like, good Lord, child, get the notes right.
yeah, so little Allison, I grew up partially in Trinidad, and then I planted myself as an immigrant in the US. And at that point, I really started to write. I was this quiet little Caribbean girl taught to put your head in the book, keep diving in and you will find your way. Education, as you know, which is a common Caribbean thread across all nations that is really pulled on and really nurtured in many ways. So for me, that's what I did. And writing also just offered me a way to just be free, offered me the opportunity to not feel like I was being judged in any way. Because so much around you, especially when you're born in one country and raised in another, I think makes you feel foreign. It makes you feel like an outsider. So that allowed me in my own silent spaces to just keep writing. I just kept writing journals and journals and journals. My kids sometimes ask me, Do you have any of your journals from back then? What? I wish I did. So once my mom moved from our childhood house, I think they got lost somewhere in the midst. But reflective of that was the little me. Going forth from there, I knew at some point, you're raised either you're going to be a lawyer, doctor, engineer. So at some point, I had to choose one of those tracks. And I went into law, and I had I would say the blessing to walk on Howard Law campus,
Hey.
to be embraced by the legacy of Howard, and really to dive into the understanding that we are social engineers. And that's one thing I'll always remember. The first year at Howard, the dean sits us all down and she asks us, why do you want to be a lawyer? What brings you here? And my fellow brothers and sisters are like, the money is right. For various reasons. We're very overt amongst each other, right? And she said, if you're not here to be a social engineer, you are in the wrong place.
Wow.
So I think Howard lends that and pulls at and nurtures that in every way possible. In every way possible. So it's a very different kind of law school to attend. It's very mission driven. And you leave there really, riled up and ready to plug yourself in as a social engineer. And that was I guess, the little to the academics of the little me.
So you have this opportunity through family that champions you succeeding and thriving, but also knowing that you're going to make a difference, that there's already an embrace of justice work or improving the lives of others. And I imagine for you, and I'm really thinking about this and I'm holding this with me. You were in an institution that had Thurgood Marshall, right? You have this incredible mind, Letitia James, who was there as well, who's I think, a attorney general or U.S. attorney in New York.
York, yeah.
Yeah. And so you carry that with you. And so, little lawyers, could you give us a perspective on like how did that happen? Because I am so excited to hear about the origin story of that. And I feel like I saw this book in a number of libraries here in Boston from some of the folks who gifted me books. And I believe I had this in my fifth grade library. And yeah, and I think, and I know that some of my young people started to think differently about law. So I'm really thinking about like the origin story of that. And my brain is pulsing as I hold that. I'm like, oh, wow, you was at the same institution of Letitia James. She don't play. And you don't play either. So sorry. Yeah. So please.
I think we're constantly looking for myself, I really wanted to give back in the sense of being able to plant those seeds younger and younger. I did not grow up in a household of lawyers and those that were able to reinforce that strength in my voice, right?
Mhm.
Talking about in all aspects of the First Amendment. Most of the times, I think marginalized communities don't really think that they should engage in understanding their First Amendment rights because they don't see access to it. They're not taught constantly, and it's not reiterated again and again that your voice has power. So I personally think leaving out of Howard and knowing that I wanted to be really engrossed in some way and purposeful in education, that really just kept pulling at my heartstrings.
Mhm.
So, I've taught now for quite a long time. I'm now at Florida International University where I won the Global Fulbright. I was the first one to win the Global Fulbright there.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And what that really means is that I was able to not just take mission my mission to understand speech rights on a domestic scale, but really to understand on an international level how young people engage with speech rights. Especially right now, we're talking about, I mean, if you're raising a kid, I have an 11-year-old and I have a 13-year-old in my house. I'm raising digital citizens.
Mhm.
Their engagement in the world it's very focused on a digital platform. So the little lawyers grows out of all of this, the passion to really plant those seeds younger and younger and younger and younger. Your Freedom, Your Power came out a couple of years ago. It was
Hmm.
one on Amazon for kids government books. And the focus was to make sure that the tools that I didn't have as a child was
Hmm.
given and accessible to all children. You're not, you don't, I don't want you to have to go to law school to know you have strength in your voice. I
Yeah.
want you to get that every day, again and again. My own children, I tell parents this. This is something you can have conversations with. It's whether or not you're voting for a vacation. The ability to vote does not start at the booth. It starts at home. It really does. And if you constantly reiterate your vote has power, meaning that I tell my own kids every time you spend $1, you're voting. You're saying how that person, how this company treats me. And believe me, they have a long list of places they would not go to.
Okay. Yeah.
How I spend my dollar is based on my ability to vote for those people and how they treat and engage in the world.
One of the things that I think about is when I was a fifth grade teacher, and we were one of the first units of study for us was looking at the Bill of Rights and helping my young people over 7 years to really look at the Bill of Rights as a conversation about what this country is built on, and like it's constructed on these freedoms and these liberties, but it wasn't always for all people. And so to make it pragmatic and make it accessible for them, we started to talk about, well, how does this live in your everyday experience? And so we got to a conversation where some of the young people who are fifth graders had to travel on what we call as the T, which is the MBTA, our subway system. And they ask questions about what are our rights in regards to being searched when we go through the turnstiles, because there are police that are there, or that actually are representative of the T or the subway system, but not wasn't the city police. And they were trying to understand whether or not they had to actually agree to be searched by uh, the train police. And they were like, we've done all this studying about our right to speak our piece, our right to assemble, and we talked about Miranda rights, which isn't in the Bill of Rights, but it was connected. And so it carried a really robust set of conversations for them about fairness and equity and justice and this thing of freedom. And we're in this really challenged time about rights and liberties at this point. And you brought up your children as part of this conversation. And so I'm curious for you as an attorney, or as a lawyer, and as someone who also is a mom, how are you having conversations with them about what's happening today? Or what would you offer to other parents who are hearing this conversation and are trying to figure out how to actually have a conversation they can hold with their children about the fact that they may not have as many rights as, that their rights may change, they shift, or even may have less rights as children than what their parents have?
That's a very powerful question. And, historically where we are, a couple years ago when my book was released, I went to Howard and they had an event that included, releasing my book and so forth. I remember talking to one of my professors who, worked with the NAACP. I mean, he's a pretty well known professor, and he had actually reached out to me at some point and talked about how he could see me kind of taking on his legacy. And I was very humbled by that. And he said it was primarily because the ability to translate law and make it so accessible so that the law is frightening to many people, many communities. I mean, if you come from a community of color, law is something that, first of all, it's expensive, is what the view is. It doesn't necessarily protect you. It's usually you're reacting to it in opposed to being proactively engaged, right? So there are so many hiccups and hurdles. And even when you talk to someone who is engaged in law, there's still the same fear for our children. There's still the same consciousness that you have to teach these kids how to interact with a police officer, how to walk strong and be bold and have conversations about practicality, because it's not only about your own inner strength, it's about the world you're engaging in and how they will react to you, right? And I tell you this because, in my household specifically, my husband is from Italy, right? And the way he walks the earth is very different.
Oh.
I married him just so I can have a scientific experiment. He laughs at that, but I think, and I think it's not necessary. And he's someone who's conscious, and he's been conscious. We've been married now for over 2 decades, so he's very conscious about and supportive in so many ways. But his ability to walk in a certain way with an expectation in a certain way is just innate. It is absolutely innate, because that's all he's been taught, is that his persona, everything about his character is wonderful. And everything about him belongs anywhere it wants to be. And there's never these engaging conversations. And people don't have these conversations between cultures. We're usually in our own garden talking to each other, and we don't necessarily engage in others' gardens, or we may not be invited in to have these conversations. So that's, for me, there's so many layers to the question that you're asking. I personally, I remind my children specifically that lean into their power, because I see that the hybrid of the system, I guess, that is in our household reminds me that myself, I sometimes take a page from my husband's book and I say, you know, there's some truth in that. You do have to walk with your strength always and have an understanding that who you are is meant to have a seat at the table. Everything about you is wonderful. Everything about you is beautiful. The Italians go on and on. They're like an extreme version of avert affection. But I think there's some importance to that. I think there's a lot of importance that marginalized communities, especially, need to hear. And I think marginalized children need to understand. And we do have to engage in the real world. I think what helps us these days is because we do have digital citizens and a lot of things are recorded. So the way you have to make sure your children understand there are ways to be protective of their being, of who they
Yeah. Yeah. I would love to lean in a little bit more to that. As I may or may not have shared with you, I'm doing this convening Black Boy Joy Summit, and some of the conversations that we're having are really about their rights, and they're seeing the ecosystem, which feels more like an echo chamber. If all you watch and your news comes from TikTok and Snapchat, and Instagram, and you're not doing the fact checking to see what your laws may say in your city, your town, your county, your state, you might believe that everything that's happening on high is happening in real time to you, or you may not even know that certain decisions that are happening, or that you have an opportunity to use your voice and leverage your voice, that you could actually come together with other folks who are speaking passionately about something you care about, and that you could change things. And so I'm curious for you, as you know, through so much of what you have created and are sharing and have gifted to us in this world, is about young people feeling empowered to leverage their voice. They may feel paralyzed, or they may question whether or not their voice is really going to be heard because of, and I'm trying to do my best to walk the line from a partisan perspective or a nonpartisan perspective, but it may feel really tough for people who have seen women's rights, you know, changed and shifted. They may feel very, very challenged by the banning of books that have Black and brown faces on them in their classrooms. I was talking to teachers who came to a conference and were in my workshop around LGBTQIA, youth, and know that when they come back to Florida specifically, that they can be fired for using pronouns that humanizes another young person. And so I'm really hoping that this conversation we're having also supports people to think differently about how powerful their voice is, whether or not it's in the classroom, whether or not it's at the school committee, at the library, at the ball court, in process of voting, or whatever may be the vehicle for them to use their voice. What would you be advising young people and or their parents to be thinking about when it comes to some of this?
Well, I think a few things. I definitely think parents, and I'm talking even as a parent myself, right? Parents need to be aware there are laws in place, specifically if you're looking at Communications Act, Section 230, okay? That they need to understand what that means. If your kid goes online and writes something, right, in a public space, they are responsible for what they've written. So you're seeing a lot of cases that are happening as a result of this because we're teaching kids two different things, right? We're teaching them you have infinite free speech. Your speech will be protected.
Yeah.
Free speech, the First Amendment is really about the government infringing on your right to speak, right? Five of those giant rights. Most people just think free speech, but you touched on something, free press. Now everybody thinks they're press. Everybody, anybody who posts something on TikTok, the way, I was just quoted in a book that for a professor who does communications in Pennsylvania, he's writing the second edition of his book. So he reached out through the Freedom Forum. I'm the first Black woman to be a fellow for the Freedom Forum in DC. Him and I were talking, great conversation, and he's teaching media and journalism. And I said, if you don't have Section 230, you need to beef it up because these platforms, they are basically have their, you, they, as far as the way the law has worked out so far, very favorable to social media platforms, meaning that they have no liability. The way it looks like right now as it stands, they have little to no liability on what you write. So third parties can go on there and put all kinds of stuff. And there have been cases recently, especially coming out of political issues, talking about, can the platform delete what people say and what there's that power look like, right? So this is only going to get bigger. This is only going to get bigger. And if you don't understand that, because there are a lot of local laws around what is considered a threat, right? And you see kids being arrested. Like last year, I read an article that 9 students got arrested before school started in Broward County in South Florida. And it was based on things that they had done on social media. So parents need to understand what that actually looks like and how kids can engage in their rights. So when you're talking about kids speaking up and language infringements, yeah, well, I mean, Florida is really leading the way. I was looking at Pan America and it was like 4,000 to 5,000 books that are banned here, which is much larger than any other state that they're reporting. So I think there's a consciousness about how far this will go. And going back to that professor at Howard, because it's really important to have someone who mentors you in life. And something he said to me, and it just stuck with me. It just went into my DNA, and it almost activated the need to really just lean in and make sure children understand these rights more than ever before. He said to me, "We are about to enter a period in history where we will be fighting for rights already." And it sat with me. This was a couple years ago. And it sat with me, and I'm like, yeah, right? And then it sat with me, right? And then it sat with me a little bit more. And there is a lot of fear in those words if you're in the legal community. There is a lot of fear in those words. And when you see really, and this is not to me at all a political issue. I always walk into classroom. I don't share my politics. I don't share my religion. I don't share any of these things that create roadblocks. For me, education is really about Socratic dialogue.
Mm.
I'm a Montessori certified educator. So I personally want everything to be experiential, meaning Maya Angelou said, you'll forget what people did, you'll forget what they said, but you certainly won't forget how they made you feel. And you know, as a teacher, and I know you're a powerhouse teacher, that what happens when you lean into students with looking at them as supplying them with tools, giving them tools to thrive in this world. It's not about you anymore. It's not about anything about you other than your ability to give them skills to thrive. The First Amendment for me is for everyone. I don't really care what your politics are. I really don't. It doesn't bother. It doesn't matter to me where you fall on the spectrum. I look at the First Amendment as a tool, a vital tool. And you can see when there is the fear to give people knowledge and the ability to have conversations and the ability to read books, you have to wonder, I should say, you don't have to wonder why it's first, why it is a First Amendment, because it's that important.
Something I'm holding. I'm navigating the tension within my body about this. What you shared, like fighting for rights that we've already won. And I'm trying to think about me back in the classroom with that question that I'm holding. And how do we hold on to hope with this being our reality? There's certain things that were already written and said and battles already won in regards to like protecting the First Amendment as well as others. But I'm curious for educators who are listening to this conversation and are thinking about their role in citizenship, their role in conversations with young people about their rights and fairness, because young people constantly fight us on what is fair, regardless of whether or not it's dinner choices, or whether or not they do chores, or this phenomenon that they're seeing play out in real life. And I want to be optimistic. And I want us to continue to be optimistic. I think that we go through seasons of where things have to course correct themselves. But I am curious for educators who are standing here with us in conversation and are thinking about this deeply. What would you advise them on in regards to the ways that they support young people and thinking about their voice, or what tools might they want to tap into, books they may want to be listening to, podcasts?
Well, I think there is definitely, I mean, I'm going to talk to you from my own observation on, I guess, many different levels in the sense that I do wear a teacher's hat, right? And I do wear a parent hat. And I do wear a First Amendment expert hat, right? So when I put all of these together, for me, I benefit from the fact that I understand law and I read what's going on in the Supreme Court all the time, right? A lot of educators don't do that.
Mhm.
Law is very, very, it's one of those topics that people see like, oh, it's just there, and you kind of push it off until something happens that you need to understand. And then it's like 911, it's an emergency.
Yeah.
Now that the climate that we're dealing with right now and the ability to walk into your classroom and just educate students and love the process of learning and seeing those light bulbs go off, a lot of that has implications that I think educators never factored in when they went into education. And that's heartfelt to me as a teacher. I've talked to teachers in Florida that said, I'm leaving education.
Mhm.
I am nervous about how to engage, how to have an active conversation with students, especially if you're talking about those students that are like middle, high school, because that's when you start having those conversations, right? The whole biological changes that are going on. That's
Mhm.
usually, you want educators to engage and be the voice that they go to and opposed to their peers. And that's where you get all your details, right?
Mhm.
Or you want to have those conversations freely, and you just see a lot of hurdles going up. And the one case I'm going to highlight, this is just me putting on the legal hat, is there's a case called Mahmoud v. Taylor, and it just happened in the Supreme Court. If educators have not read this case, it's really, really important that they understand it. And I'll tell you why. The case is out of Maryland and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and it's about parents' rights and the ability to opt out. It's specifically about LGBTQ language, books, and things like that. So the parents used to have the ability to opt out of those books. Then the school district said it's just too difficult dealing with so many parents wanting to opt out, right? And the parents basically said, well, this is a First Amendment issue because this might infringe on my freedom of religion, right? So I don't necessarily want, or some other freedom under that umbrella. But that was specifically the one that was kind of leaned on the most, right? So it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And what happened was the court sided with the parents. So I see this case as a pivotal moment. And those of us who do look at the First Amendment all the time and do talk to teachers and do want our teachers to be successful in classrooms, because I think most teachers show up just loving students and wanting to see those moments where there are milestones and growth and the ability to all of a sudden be like these critical thinkers and Socratic dialogue, being able to pull in a wide diaspora of information and have students just have access to this and have access to conversation and being able to talk when a student comes to you. And the reason I bring up this case is because this case is going to set up some potential situations. Potential in that you're going to want to have conversations with students, and that might fall under the umbrella as to whether or not parents think you're infringing on that First Amendment right that the Supreme Court had said is really important, that parents have this option to opt out. So I want to really highlight this. I think for me, these cases are about stories. Okay. And when I address things, the way I make it really accessible is just what I just did, right? I made a case very, very easy to understand because a case is about people. It's about people. It's about somebody fails. I tell my students in class, give me the juicy cases. Come on, let's go. This is usually criminal evidence.
Yeah.
Give me the juicy cases and let's break them down and understand what the problem is amongst the people. And then we bring in the law. And then that's when we start weaving our fabric and understanding what threads we need to pull on more than others, right? So to understand the facts of a case and to understand the law and the marriage between the two and how the court is going to assess all of this, it's a story about someone usually that thinks something is just unfair or wrong. And when we look at these cases, that's what I did with Your Freedom, Your Power. I looked at cases that kids had brought because kids love their peers. They love to learn from their peers. We know this as teachers. They're like, hey, what's going on? What? You can do this? And your parent could have said that 500 times to you. And all of a sudden your peer tells you, and you're like, they come home like, hey, mama, guess what? What you can tell you that for the last lifetime. But for me, when I wrote Your Freedom, Your Power, it was for you to have a tool as an educator, for you to have a tool as a teacher, for you to have a tool as a parent, for you to have a tool as a kid that just wants to read stories of people. Like you talked about the videotaping, right? What about Darnella Frazier doing during George Floyd? That's in Your Freedom, Your Power. It's about kids who have done it before. You know, I walk into a classroom and say, hey, anybody take like a picture of a body part and send it lately? Kids are like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, well, let me see someone's phone because you might have broken the law. And it's about sexting. So you have to make everything relevant to what kids do every day, because then they get it. It's just part of the landscape of what they're already living. And you're right, you do need tools. As an educator, you need tools in your toolbox. It's really, really important.
Well, I appreciate you sharing this case specifically and just giving to actually bring it home for folks who are thinking about this and from multiple perspectives. And I also hold that these holding of stories and knowing that stories drive the conversations that may create tension, but it also allows for more people to look at it from different vantage points. Again, to better understand how do we humanize each other through storytelling, to understand why particular laws or lines are drawn. And I guess the question is always like, who is a design to protect and who is a designer to marginalize? I'll hold that word. And that there is a great opportunity for people to do deeper work around just understanding the laws and just all of this is happening. Are there resources that you would offer to folks to who are looking for something that feels humanizing, that feels accessible, that they can tap into for themselves so that it may feel lofty, but you actually have resources that could feel very at home that they can listen to, see, view, hold in their hands?
Well, yeah, I go back to Your Freedom, Your Power for sure. Kids Guide to the First Amendment. My college students use it to just understand the basics of their rights. It's written for middle grade, right? So as soon as you start reading, my kids read it at 9 and 11 years old and read through the whole book. The audio also is by a young girl reading the book because my kids chose that voice because it made it engaging. The stories were lively, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also, just for your audience, right? And it's just because I know the moment we're in. I know the moment, and meeting that moment takes all of us, all of us. Whatever your talent is, it takes all of us lifting together.
Yeah.
That's been done time and time again. But what we have now, we have a really interesting situation because we have kids who've never had to, I think, fight for their rights in the
Mm-hmm.
same way that historically has happened. But I think we have kids who have all the talents to fight and the
Okay.
energy once they realize that those rights are in danger, right?
Mm.
So and I think the same is for educators, for teachers, those who go in and they commit themselves to the mission of plugging in and pouring in their passion and uplifting children from all communities and making sure that they get to the next level. I mean, that's the art of teaching. I always tell my own students, when you walk into my room, I hold you on this pedestal. It's up to you to get off the pedestal, okay? And then sometimes I had one student, she walked in, she had a lot going on, did not show up for a few classes. I stalked her, emailed her, and got her back in class. And she went from an F in my class to a B. And I never want to be the person on your transcript that holds you back. So I look at life as that. It's those moments that you want to remember. I want you to get beyond where I've gone, not where I am, not where I am. Where I am is a good starting point to help you maneuver. But you've got so much more to give this world. And I think every teacher has that passion within them. And these times are very difficult to walk into classrooms and to feel like energized because students require your energy. They
Mm.
require all of you. Sometimes they require the things you're just like not even mentally ready for. um, and and I tell you as someone who teach middle school, but I would say what I'm going to do for the first 10 educators who reach out to me, okay, if they want me to do a reading with them, you know, virtually, for their to start off the new school year, um, and to kind of set students up to understand, especially, I would say, make sure you have the tool of Your Freedom, Your Power so that we can have an engaging conversation and the students can look to different parts of the book. And I will also send those teachers a curriculum guide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Whatever talent we have, we've got to just have to pour it in at this point. So I feel like I personally, so my book that comes out next year, it's a Penguin Rise book,
Okay.
and it's being drawn by Edel Rodriguez, who draws covers of Time magazine. So he as he starts, the beautiful illustrations of this book. The reason we're really pushing for this book to come out next year is because we're planting the seed of the First Amendment, your first freedoms from 0 to 5. And
Mm.
I want to make law, I had a talk with my editor and we were all talking about, what's going on? Is there anything that we need to change? And I lean on the side of positivity because kids need that energy from us. They do see a lot going on and everybody's making news. The news, when you hear all of the terminations of different contracts and stuff, that's not the news that students go to. That's not the digital citizens that we're teaching. They're not watching, the big traditional forms of media. So I think there has to be some consciousness that the audience that you're engaging.
Sound like we just got some tea that there's a new book coming out. Hot dog. All right. We'll take it. We'll take it. Thank you. For those who want to continue to support you, follow you, just be in your ecosystem, what would be the ways that they could go about that?
I guess the best way is via Instagram. So just get on there. My team also monitors that and also follow the little lawyers. I think right now we have been engaged in a number of things, especially as I'm doing quite a bit with the Freedom Forum. And I also want to be able to post opportunities. Next week I'm going to be in DC. So if you're in DC, pop by. I'm going to be one of the authors at Black Books Matter Fest, run by Mahogany Books, and that's in the National Harbor. So I enjoy engaging with educators. I enjoy having conversations. It's called civil discourse, right? That's the whole point. Being able to just engage in conversation. Nothing in life needs to be polarized because polarization, that's where you stop conversation. You stop Socratic discussion. And young people, they have what the Greeks call parisia, which is the freedom. When you see all these, Greek myths that came about, it
Mhm.
was really those who wanted to criticize what was going on and they wanted that freedom. So they did it via Greek comedy. And I feel, and that is really the birth of free speech in the European sense. So, and I think that is what has shaped our freedom of speech, if you will, because it was for those people, right? It was not necessarily for all people. But I think we can take a page from that, and that was very Greek comedy is comical,
Yeah.
but the ability to freely engage. We want to have these conversations. We want to have open debate. We want to have these moments where you tell people, yes, these 5 powers, and your power may not be speaking. Your power might be writing. I know that's one of my big powers. And I shape that and I mold it and I continue to shape it. And I personally, in this year, I'm also going to be opening up workshops where I am working with others to shape their writing. I think writing doesn't stop with me. Writing is for all of us. And I found so much power from my childhood writing. And I feel that when you do feel, I've heard people use the word powerless in various aspects lately. When you feel power, lean into the powers that locally allow you to thrive.
Thank you so much for just continuing to be a light and be such a positive force and to even push me in my feelings about all of the things that are showing up, Supreme Court and beyond, but to frame it in a way that can feel optimistic. It is about perspective. And Allison, I really appreciate the fact that you keep doing the incredible work you do. You're putting incredible books in the hands of our young people so that they have something that feels accessible to them. And I appreciate the fact that you continue to share even more of the jewels and gems of your genius with us. So thank you.
You are amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Craig. I was really elated to come and meet you and have this powerful conversation up of courage.
Yes, yes, it is. And I'm just like, okay, like I'm massaging my beard. I'm like, God, I need some beard balm because I'm rubbing because like, oh yes. However, but we don't have enough time. Anyway, but I want to offer incredible gratitude. I definitely will share all of the resources in our show notes and actually cross promote and share some of the new the books that are currently, alive and well for us to tap into, as well as some of the other opportunities, because I think that there are some educators who I know I'm engaging with who would probably love to be in your ecosystem and hear a little bit more, because we're not hearing it from anyone else. So I appreciate you for being that voice for us.
Thank you for having me.
All good. All right, for Brave Voices fam, I know some stuff stirred in your spirit. I don't even have to ask if. You ain't got time to keep it to yourself. Young people need it, and we need you to share with your village, your brave ones, your loved ones. If this stirred, and if this is something that feels memorable, and this also inspires you to want to be part of the Brave Voices pod, please make sure you tap the link in the bio and join us. So I want to actually invite you to continue to lead with courage, lead with love. And until next time, generate your own joy, never go it alone, get free, and always love your brave. Y'all take care.